Last night, we had a no-hitter at Haymarket Park. We'll discuss it next.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Man, and thank you for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. Free and available wherever you get your podcasts, and of course on YouTube as well. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. $150 with any winning $5 bet. Head to FanDuel.com/locked on to get started.
All right, good morning. As you said, Connor, last night, no-hitter at Haymarket Park, Jackson Brockett for Nebraska. Seriously, after Tuesday in Omaha when Creighton hung a 6 spot on the Huskers in the first inning, just check this out right here.
And 7th pitch. Swing and a miss! Jackson Brockett, write your name in the record books. Nebraska's first individual no-hitter since 1954.
All right.
Unbelievable.
That was something else, wasn't it? I'm going to get us back on the screen here.
Yeah.
How does this happen? You saw Nebraska baseball in person on Tuesday night, sleepwalk through at least the first inning, but you could argue most of a game against Creighton. Is it as simple as the calendar turns to May and here comes Nebraska's number 5 starter out to no-hit a Big 12 team?
It is not, because I'm going to chalk this up to, college baseball doesn't really make any sense when you really put it all together that way. So Jackson Brockett, the guy who threw a no-hitter last night and was completely dominant, 12 strikeouts, 107 pitches, hadn't even pitched in a game for almost a month. He had only thrown 5 1/3 innings the entire season. And people were wondering, is he still on the team? Is he still around? What's going on here? And then he pops up and, gets the start. And you're hoping Nebraska, after the game on Tuesday night, put themselves in a pretty rough pitching position for the rest of the week because they had to use a lot and, didn't get a lot out of Ty Horn, their starter, on Tuesday night. And they got to play, just one day off before they head into a weekend series. They're kind of behind the 8 ball from a pitching perspective. So you're probably asking Jackson Brockett to either, give you 3 innings or, wear it in order to get to 3 innings. Just give me 9, 12 outs or something like that. And he goes and throws a complete game, 9 inning, 107 pitch no hitter. So I think he did his job, first of all, but the second thing was, how unbelievable is that? It's the most unlikely thing. It's up there with Phil Humber throwing a perfect game for the White Sox a decade ago. It's shocking.
It's not like he did this against Kansas Wesleyan.
Right.
Kansas State is also in contention for an at-large NCAA tournament bid. The Wildcats are 10-11 in the Big 12, which puts you firmly on the bubble. Nebraska's been in that spot in its Big 12 days. And if you finish above 500 in that conference, you're generally in. It's 26-18 and has an RPI of number 36. Nebraska, after that performance last night, has an RPI, according to WarrenNolan.com, of 20. So here we are talking about the Huskers and Will Bolt's team, who we want to throw dirt on after the season series sweep at the hands of Creighton and, kind of losing a game or here or there in the Big Ten that you'd think a team that felt comfortable about the postseason wouldn't lose. And they go out and throw a no-hitter. Unbelievable. 1954, the last time this happened. So I saw Troy Dannon got in on the social media excitement. He didn't know who Jackson Brockett was. He didn't before last night. Jackson Brockett, by the way, is a kid from a lefty, a sophomore from Elkhorn South, who played his final year of high school baseball at Buford, Georgia. So he went down to a baseball powerhouse in the South, pre-Dylan Raiola at Buford, Georgia, they didn't share time there, share expertise. Dylan had nothing to do with this last night, folks. If you were thinking that maybe it's because of the time that Jackson Brockett spent in high school with Dylan Raiola, that's not it. And
it's funny that there's a small connection, though. That's
yeah, right. Anybody who touches Dylan. So and then he decides to come back to Nebraska, committed to Nebraska, and really, as you said, had been a non-factor this year on the mound until last night.
Yeah, it's just shocking stuff. And so big picture for Nebraska baseball, we talked about him briefly the other day after the Tuesday night game, and it was like, well, I don't know. They kind of are getting projected as a potential host, 2 seed in that range. I don't like the look. I don't like the feel of it right now. It doesn't set up well for the next couple weeks when you play all these games. And one completely out of left field night changes your view completely. It
changes everything.
Yeah. Like it's amazing. It changes the feeling. It changes the setup, and you got a real quality win out of it as well. So yeah, they're kind of like back in the mix in that category where we were ready to kill them the other night.
You know whose reaction I would like to have seen last night is Ed Service. If you're at Creighton and you've just walked all over these guys 3 times in the last month, including once at their own stadium where this happened last night, and you pop on social media, maybe he turned on. I think Ed's got a Big Ten Plus package.
I do not. I don't think that Ed has social media either. So he probably found out this morning.
Somebody on his staff called him and said, "Hey, you're not going to believe this, coach, but Jackson Brockett just threw a no-hitter." And he said, "Oh, for who? Who's that?" I mean, I remember he's like, "I remember recruiting him probably at Elkhorn South. Where did he end up?" Yeah, he's at Nebraska, and he just no-hit Kansas State. So I think that this pumps life into their season. That was, if not on life support, there were some tough to handle vibes in that clubhouse after the way things had been going on Sundays in the Big Ten and in the midweek. And it also opens some eyes nationally. Even though it's a win is a win is a win, it's not really that way. Like if you throw a no-hitter and all of a sudden you're the talk of the college baseball world on a Wednesday night in May, mind you, it is May. That's when the selection committee gets together this month and makes the 64-team field. They're going to remember that. They're going to be like, "Oh, we're talking about Nebraska now. Should we send them to this place, this place?" They had that no-hitter, on a Wednesday night. I saw that. You get in their mind, and it matters. So now they're kind of back in control of their own destiny, in some way, shape, or form, and go take care of business in the Big Ten. You don't have to worry about this midweek stuff anymore. One more midweek game, and maybe they can take some momentum into June after all that's strangely transpired this spring.
Yeah, I guess the calendar turns to May, and that's the way it turned out anyway. But we had to start the show with that today because what an unbelievable and totally out of left field deal. But coming back, we're going to talk a little bit about Mitch's next thing that he's bringing out on The Athletic. Just a little bit of a roster preview. We'll dive through some things with that, and still plenty more coming up on the Locked On Nebraska podcast. Stay tuned. All right, quick timeout to talk about Monopoly Go. I know what you're thinking. You've already talked about Monopoly Go. You talk about Monopoly Go all the time, but there's just so much good stuff inside Monopoly Go, the game. In Monopoly Go, you could team up with friends or for time tournaments where you can work together to build each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. You can also get unique stickers to trade, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, which I really enjoy. Hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or you heist their vaults. There's all of these things that you can't get in just regular old Monopoly. Monopoly Go features constantly changing tournaments and challenges. There's mini games like digging for treasures, and there's always new events that can help you win big. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and download it now free on the Google Play or App Store. All right, welcome back. We're going to talk about Mitch's story here in just a second. So Zach Bryan did indeed leave town. He didn't put another guy on stage like a offensive lineman or something like that. But the local media fancies themselves this guy named Jason Isbell, and he was in
about this
last night. So you were not part of the horde that went over there in I think it was in La Vista.
Let me tell you a little story. So a couple weeks ago, somebody in the local media comes up to me and says, hey, are you an Isbell fan? Where do you think my mind went, Connor?
Royal center fielder Kyle Isbell.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, talking about the Royals here? Like,
nobody's ever asked me that before, but yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'm like, that's a weird way to get into it. I mean, I might go like Salvi first, the first question. But this person who was tweeting about Jason Isbell yesterday was like, oh, no. I'm talking about Jason Isbell, the singer. And I'm like, oh, yeah, not really on my radar. But, there may have been a day where I fit into the young sports writer demographic. And sadly, I'm now the middle-aged sports writer demographic that on a Wednesday night in May, if I'm not watching midweek baseball on TV, I'm probably driving my kids around somewhere. And that's what I was doing last night while so many others were enjoying Jason Isbell.
So I think contractually, actually, you have to like Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah. That's what I was told, is he's the new Springsteen. And I'm fine with Springsteen. I mean, I'm down with Springsteen. I enjoy his music. Would not call myself an overwhelmingly massive fan. I do not have like the sports writer love that so many others do. But I mean, how can you not? Like it's like Americana, to the max. So I'm fine with it. But Isbell, I'm gonna have to check out some of his sound.
Not Kyle Isbell. The sound of the bat cracking or something like that. Okay, so you got a story up on The Athletic right now, and we talked about it a little bit yesterday, but it was a painstaking process, I think, for you to just dive into all the names and cross match them and mix them all together. What do we turn up with, and what were some of your takeaways for looking at Nebraska's roster heading into the summer?
Yeah, so I started doing this in January, when really it became clear, as we've discussed in the past, that you can't really go with an 85 in an attempt to break down a roster. The 85 man scholarship limit is so 2020. Yeah. Now, with NIL involved, it's about the 120. Really, it was the 110 or the 115. Depending on the year that you were looking at. And this is the number that a school is allowed to bring, a football program is allowed to bring into preseason camp. So all year, if you're a player toward the bottom, you're working to get in that 120. Obviously, most of the guys that we all know and see are well within the 120. They're well within the 85, so they don't have to worry about that. But under Matt Rhule, Nebraska is a program that focuses on featuring depth and building talent development. So this is an important number. And it's 120 now, after a ruling by the NCAA in March to expand it temporarily. They'll probably expand it permanently. But this year, it's definitely 120. And coming out of spring, with the transfer portal now closed, officially, the transfer portal is closed. I suppose there's a possibility someone else could end up, news could come out today, but I think it's closed. I went through the exercise of picking 120 players, and let me tell you, that's not easy, because there's 150 on the roster.
Yeah, I mean, so what was the process of like taking people? It's I can't imagine it's that difficult, because as we've talked about throughout the entire spring, you hear of guys, you already know who the scholarship guys are. And then you kind of have to pare it down from there, freshman class, stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I was looking through it, and I noticed one of the things that I kind of went through was how much depth of players who have actually played before. And I mean, I don't know how uncommon that is, but Nebraska's got a lot of players on their roster all the way probably past 85 that have like played in the game for them before, which is kind of amazing to think about. Not that it's all quality depth or anything like that, but I mean, they have a lot of guys on their roster who have just played college football before, which probably gets you a leg up in some ways.
This is partly a product of just not having a lot of portal entries. So, number 60 through 100 on your roster are not jumping ship for Matt Rhule at this point in the development of his program after any season. It was easy to pick about 110 to 112. And then I really had to look down, look through it and compare resumes and look at experience and look at the positions that I was evaluating. And even at the end of that, I mean, you're talking about 24 defensive backs in this group, 23 offensive linemen in this group. And you've got to have some position groups that are just stacked and loaded with bodies in order to get to 120 players. I'll say I did not include Demetrius Bell, who is likely out for a while with the knee injury that he sustained Saturday in the spring game. I did not include Leslie Black, who is a down the depth chart defensive lineman, and is likely not going to be in the 120 because he's recovering from injury. And I didn't include Evan Taylor, who is an incoming freshman defensive back that dealt with a number of injuries as a high school senior, and Nebraska stuck with him despite a long rehab period that he has ahead. So there's 3 scholarship players who are out of it and will be part of the team, but just not the 120 likely because they'll be hurt still.
But you did include Blyhill, who went down in the spring game with an injury. What do you think about that one?
I did because Nebraska's hopeful. Nebraska feels like that injury was not as significant as what Demetrius Bell sustained, and there's hope. I'll say that he is back and ready to participate in practice in August. Now, maybe it's not a situation where you're going to have him 100% at the beginning of camp, but if he's able to participate and he's going to be someone that you can see as your starting corner opposite Tommy Hill early in the season, then you want him in camp. You want him there working, getting mental reps alongside everybody. And maybe it's a deal where he's cleared and he's 100%, but I don't know that they even quite have a handle on that at this stage. It's more, this is a projection, and it's 4 months from now when camp opens.
How much do you think they pare down, not from being on the 120 to being on the actual roster, but just guys who are going to play? 7 running backs you have listed on here: Ramir Johnson, Maurice Mazuka, Gabe Irvin, Dante Dowdell, Emmett Johnson, Quentin Ives, and Kenneth Williams, each of which have been talked about by the coaching staff. We know the injury or the health status of Irvin and Ramir at this point. I would imagine that Gabe Irvin, if he comes back and he's healthy enough, probably gets an opportunity to win the job. But there's a lot of guys in that room who have their eyes set, I think, on playing time this fall.
Yeah. Gabe Irvin's won the job twice, but he's also coming off of a hip injury, which is tough for any player, but a running back needs to have that kind of lateral movement. And if there's residual from that, or he's limited in any way, then that's going to take a toll at that spot, at what he's asked to do. So there's not going to be a lot more attrition. I think Nebraska will pare down the roster a bit, the overall roster just a bit over the summer. And it's not so much Nebraska paring it down. It's guys being, who are walk-ons, who are down the line on the depth chart, who are seeing a lack of positions available for them, who may just step away. Now, you can't go into the portal at this point unless you're a graduate and just head to another team. But I don't think the roster is going to be 150 players deep when they open the season. When school begins in late August, a week before the opener, I don't know that they're going to add 30 players. They've been working to get that closer to 120. So you can basically have your entire team at the beginning of camp. Probably not going to hit that number this year, but 150 still seems somewhat large.
Yeah. Okay, we still got a couple things left to cover here in the final segment. We'll go back to a Matt Rhule comment from Saturday that hit some people's ears in a different way. So we'll do that after, of course, the reminder that if you're watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume with all the shouting, Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Back after this.
All right, we've already talked about Kyle Isbell in this podcast. So another win on Wednesday for the Kansas City Royals, and the day is creeping closer when I will be walking inside Kauffman Stadium in Kansas City watching the playoff-bound Kansas City Royals do their thing. And that experience for me and my family is going to be better because of Gametime. Gametime is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball. It makes getting tickets easier and faster. Prices on the Gametime app go down closer to the first pitch. It's got all-in pricing, no fees at checkout, deals for specific zones of the stadium, flexible customer service. Why wouldn't you want to give it a shot if you're getting ready to go watch some Major League Baseball? Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with the Gametime app. You can create an account and use the code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account, redeem the code Locked On College for $20 off. Terms apply. Check it out at gametime.co and download the Gametime app today. Lowest price guaranteed. All right, segment 3 here on the show today on a Thursday. Tomorrow, Connor, we're gearing up for a guest. Is this right? This is the plan. Our first guest ever on the Locked On Nebraska podcast.
Yeah, I think we're headed that direction. We'll get final confirmation at some point today, but I think we're headed that way. Another guy who's well aware of the Isbells, whether it's Kyle or Jason. Yes.
Before we may do some of that on Fridays throughout this period of the year. Bring in guests, media, whoever it might be, somebody in the sports community. So hope everyone who's listening and watching enjoys that. And a reminder, if you're checking us out on YouTube and you're going to be in your car later, you can find us on all of the podcast listening platforms: Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music. If you're listening to us today and you're going to be sitting at your desk later and you want to get this show, check us out on YouTube. We're there and you can see our faces. And when we play videos, like we're going to play here in a moment of Matt Rhule, you can actually see him on your computer screen. It's a fascinating thing that I've discovered here in the last few weeks as we've been doing this show. So one topic that Matt Rhule brought up on Saturday after the spring game that we haven't discussed much so far is the issue of tampering. And he lauded Thomas Fedoni, Nebraska's talented tight end, for sticking with the Huskers in various off seasons, but especially now that he's healthy and past the multiple knee injuries that he suffered early in his career. Rhule lauded him for sticking with Nebraska. Without naming any names, Matt Rhule said that there are players on his team who are bringing messages to him and other staff members that they've received from outside schools, basically recruiting them off the Nebraska roster. And Rhule was asked a follow-up question to that about his level of concern over tampering in college football. Here's what he had to say.
What's your level of comfort with the amount of tampering that you're seeing?
It is what it is. It is what it is. They're gonna call D-Bell and say, come here, come there. But when he's hurt, who's in there with him? We are. So I just gonna coach them all like they're my younger brother. You know, I don't like to say sons because that, you know, that's a weird dynamic. I coach them all like they're my younger brother. You know, hard on them probably. You know, like an older brother is. Try to give them advice. Try to listen to them. Help them through this. I mean, sometimes they offer you so much money you got to leave. You know, and coaches complain about it. My assistant coaches do the same thing to me. Hey, coach, I got this offer to go there. So, you know, I just want them all to be successful. And so, but you know, it's you know, it's a sad state. I'll just say that it's just a sad state. But it is what it is, man. And you know what? A lot of people want to come here too, and a lot of people want to stay here. So, roster numbers are certainly not going to be our issue in terms of having enough good players. You
know? Okay.
Yeah.
Level of comfort. Steve Sipple, I apologize. It was not level of concern. He asked Matt Rhule about his level of comfort, and Matt Rhule he seems to be fairly comfortable with it, I guess.
I think it's a good way to approach it. Like coaches and fans, we don't have enough bandwidth to think about who's going to get tampered with and all this stuff. Like it is a part of the game now. And although it happens, as a quiet part, I think, and sometimes it gets said out loud, like it did by Rhule on Saturday, talking about Thomas Fidone. He's not calling anybody specifically out or anything like that. The story definitely changes if you start calling people out, by name and say, hey, look, no, this guy from whatever conference.
That's a national headline. Yes.
Right. That's a national headline. That's a national story. It changes things a little bit. But as it's all happening in the background constantly, it's happening literally right now as we speak. It's just air, it's there. So I have a hard time getting too riled up about it because it's so prevalent in the sport. And, kudos to Fidone who stiff-armed it and stuck with Nebraska and, did what he wanted to do. But I imagine there's a lot of stories like that around the country.
Yeah, and it just puts college football fans on edge. As you get to this time of year, when you get to this week on the calendar at the end of April, beginning of May, when you get into December, and there's 4 weeks in December when players can go into the portal, every social media post, unfortunately, from a talented player on the roster for the team that you follow gets overanalyzed. We saw that happen this week with Malachi Coleman, and he put a post up about new beginnings. And it was like immediately the minds of Nebraska fans went in a bad direction. Like, well, where's Malachi's leaving? It's like, no, and Malachi, he had to come back with a clarification a few hours later and say, hey, look, I'm not going anywhere. I'm excited about this. And that's what this was about. This was about a new beginning at Nebraska. You may have noticed, he didn't say this, but you may have noticed they've had 7 consecutive losing seasons. And this is still a new beginning with Matt Rhule, even as the Huskers go into year 2.
Yeah. Now players can also, tap into that. They could take advantage of everybody being on edge and use that to gum up controversy or whatever they did. I don't think that Malachi was doing that, but we've definitely seen it before, whether it's in the recruiting game or on the roster, just people playing games with people. That is way more likely to happen nowadays where, like you said, everybody's on edge a little bit. So my advice to fans would be just like, this is the way I've gone. I start to care about things more and more just as they happen on the field in the 12 games. I think that's the way that Matt Rhule, likes it. And then we're going into the piece of the summer now where we're going to be talking about conference realignments and all this garbage, TV deals and all this stuff. And it just gets more and more cumbersome, I think, every single year. So I think, I look up and I'm like, thank you when the season rolls around, because then we get to forget about all the other crap that we got to talk about in the time when the season isn't happening.
Last thought on this. College football did this to itself. College football wanted to have free agency, essentially.
Yep.
It wanted to have players compensated like they were smaller versions. College football was a smaller version, a toned down version of the NFL. And I don't even know if it's toned down at this point. Yeah, the money's not as big, but the transactional nature of it is even crazier in some ways than the NFL, where
because there's no contracts.
Where players are locked into contracts in the NFL. Yeah. So this is what college football asked for, and it's getting it now. And Matt Rhule's not up there, crying over his situation. You hear what he said at the end, and he said people want to come here too. And I think that's an important point to take away from what he said and what his feelings are. He's not looking to put the spilled milk back into the container. It's out, and they're willing to play the game that's out there for them to play. Now, if you are a coach at Northern Arizona or Incarnate Word or San Jose State, you have a different gripe entirely about what this situation means for your program. But at Nebraska, you take the good with the bad and you hope you come out with a net gain at the end.
Yeah, I think so too. All right, Mitch, excited for tomorrow. Excited for our guest.
Absolutely.
We'll break some things down with him.
We'll try to make it work for our YouTube viewers. We'll try to make it work so we're not like in a screen where you can't even see us. So there's a plan in place, and if you're listening, I don't think you'll notice much of a difference. But
got to execute
with us. Yeah. All right. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and it's now available on the Amazon Fire TV, on your Amazon Fire TV in the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7. It covers the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available free on the Fire TV channels app.